think yourself lucky that we stopped there, yokel.
My lord, I beg you, we have nothing left.
Silence, woman! You asked for it. What? There! Seize him!
Are you ready to dive into Middle England? To nobly fight for a king who spent less than 5% of his reign in your country? And to even more nobly eat the rich, steal from the rich and give to the poor? Robin Hood The Legend of Sherwood is a stealth RTS released in 2002 by Spellbound Entertainment for our banditry desires. However, the man in tights will have to wait. Sadly, this is not one of those old games that's aged gracefully technically. Now, I have played this game when I was very young on a Windows 98 machine. I know I'm old, and I don't remember any problems there, but there are definitely several now. To start with, this game has no widescreen setting in the main menu of the Steam or the GOG version. You're stuck in 4:3. You can set the resolution directly in the save profiles using a hex editor, some instructions as to how and below. But this does have the downside of breaking the UI and making things generally look smaller than in the original game. Also, don't set the resolution too big. The game doesn't like drawing the edge of the map, and the sizes of the map change between maps. So you can find yourself changing it multiple times if you're right on the edge. And changing the resolution back mid-game seems to not resize the cursor. You can see it here, warping the game around like a cursed artifact. If you're on GOG, you can probably stop here. That decision is all you need to handle, but if you're on Steam or using the original disc, you'll find the game is still very laggy on modern machines, and sometimes your drawing can break in the same way as when you're oversizing the map. Your best bet is to use dgVoodoo 2, instructions below, but basically it emulates older graphic APIs, allowing the game to run just as it did in 2002. It also lets you run a more intended resolution that gets rid of the black bars on the sides of your monitor. Personally, I preferred this than changing the resolution every time, although while I didn't see them nor did Stream, recording has kept the black bars for you guys. dgVoodoo 2 does bring your game up to being able to be played, but sadly Robin Hood is still quite a buggy game. I had 3 or 4 crashes in my 15 hours to finish the game. Made worse by the fact that the game doesn't autosave for you. And a couple of bugs such as this merry man who's faked his death. Guess HM revenue and customs was just as aggressive in the 12th century. But it's still a very charming game under all these bugs and problems, and with that all set up, now we're ready to play. Robin Hood takes place in the forgotten, violent land of Middle England and York. You've come back from the Holy Lands and face off against the Sheriff of Nottingham, who has disinherited you from your estates in your absence. To do so, you're going to need to build your little band of freedom fighters, aka your merry men, to fight an insurgency in which you punch,
there, one less,
shoot, steal, and kill.
I'll send your widow a purse.
A healthy percentage of the population to clear the way for the true king's return. When you're not stealthing your way from cities and castles of northern England, you'll be laying ambushes and doing some light resource gathering and combat improvements back home in Sherwood Forest. There is a story, but apart from some fun impressions of these long-standing characters, particularly the man himself.
Good evening, my child. Take a seat in nomine Patris.
Your voice is quite strange, Father.
There isn't too much going on here. The visuals are made from these extremely detailed artworks that form the level maps. You have a fixed camera view, but the levels have obviously been cleverly designed to limit the occasions you wouldn't be able to see one of your team members. Not that you won't miss the ability to turn your camera from time to time. These maps are really beautiful, and if we were to take a closer look at York here, you can see the river ice cracking, the busy market, the heavily defended church and keep. They're really gorgeous environments to play in. That said, most environments are somewhat samey, usually a castle with some buildings either inside or outside the walls, and they get used a fair amount across the missions. You'll see each of them several times. Not that I would expect too much variety considering the English setting. I'm not exactly asking to add looting a pyramid to Robin's crimes. but stretching to one more map that takes place on the coast or with a large underground section, for example, that should have been possible and would have shaked things up a little bit and add some more memorable locations. They do try to keep the places feeling fresh, with each of these maps coming in a variety of times: night, day, and that third time of day, fog. Additionally, there are 3 smaller maps that take place in Sherwood Forest for a much greener setting, although without the time weather variations for these, they do begin to feel a lack of variety as the game goes on. Honestly though, the maps are just so beautiful, I just feel greedy and want more of them. It's mostly a small nitpick. As for the character models, we now leave 2D behind. Well, kind of. Their 3D models have been captured and saved in a set number of directions, making them function like sprites, but with the benefit that the animations are a lot easier to produce, so there are quite a few unique actions, adding a lot of fun and variety between the different character models. For example, there are 3 different animations of people devouring a leg of some unlucky animal. The game did win an award for its gameplay and animations, and it shows. They don't look quite as fine as if they'd been hand-drawn sprites, but they look charming enough with brighter colours to contrast the backgrounds more drab grey and browns. And they definitely have the lower resolution, helping them out and giving these guys the impression of complicated clothing and gear rather than highlighting how their faces are barely defined. Sound of the game follows the same theme of several amazing tracks and good to decent voice acting that gets reused throughout the entire game. Sometimes too much.
Wow! Robin Hood!
The general atmosphere is set by these slow tracks with strings and punctuated by a few horns or drums and some choirs for a few tracks. Each map having its own theme in a day and night version, the themes largely being more lively, with Nottingham for example starting with those really exuberant horns. Whilst night tracks will push you more strongly into a stealth vibe and the feeling of being an intruder. There is only one track for combat and alarm each, so get ready to start searching the map for whatever went wrong when you start hearing this.
Who are you? Hey! Time on!
There's also a lot of voice acting, both from dialogue, with this kind of weird talking head on a scroll. Most of the characters are fine, but Robin Hood and Prince John in particular steal the show on this.
I won't let myself be had. But dear friends, this is the opportunity we've been waiting for. This letter from Leopold tells me that he will only release Richard in return for a ransom. And what a ransom! No less than £100,000!
Our duty is clear. We must preserve the kingdom from that criminal's appetite. Marion, we must make contact with Sir Ranulph. If he's still truly loyal to our good King Richard, his assistance will be valuable to us. As for the ransom, well, we'll collect it ourselves.
There's a large variety of callouts from your team and other characters in response to abilities and situations. For example, when spotting a body,
Well...
Are you alright?
or forcing a beggar to reveal his face.
Wow! Robin Hood!
Show yourself!
All right.
There's a lot of callouts. I mentioned that I played this game when I was young, and one of the things about the game that was burned into my memory was some of the voice lines from the characters. And on replay, it's clear why I remember them. To explain, take a look at this child. Every time he sees Robin Hood or one of his merry men, he says this.
Wow! Robin Hood!
Every time he sees Robin Hood or one of his merry men, he says this.
Wow!
And it's not a long cooldown.
My good
You
lord.
can say it every 10 seconds. So if you spend 3
Robin
minutes
Hood!
handling guards right here, you can hear this child say it 18 times.
Wow! Robin Hood!
Beggars also love saying this.
Arms, my good lord. Arms.
And guards in combat are a
Wow,
medley of
Robin
repeated lines
Hood!
as much as they may be voiced by different people, but often say the same thing and they speak a lot in combat.
Is he
I saw
asleep?
you do it there! The archers! Behind!
On
Show
guard.
you I will! Careful! Wake up!
I'm too strong
Wow!
for you.
Robin Hood!
Are you alright? Attack! I
I'm too strong for you.
Brigand! I'll show you are with.
Generally, the quality of the voice acting is fine, and some of the combinations with more complex actions such as this
What's this?
I see.
Oh, money!
Yes,
Again, pick it up.
I didn't do anything. He's pinched by arrows.
It's not me, it's him!
Stop!
could really sell the intelligence of the NPC AI. But dear lord, some of these have said so much.
Wow! Robin Hood!
Some previous players may be remembering that you can change comment frequency in the settings, which, true, but that setting itself is funky. Instead of changing some global cooldown timer, it instead is a level setting which allows different interactions to play lines, but not how often. So for example, with frequency set to max, the Merry Men are now allowed to also say things both when they start moving and finish moving.
Consider it done. Child's play.
Yahoo!
With the setting on minimum, I'm not entirely sure what extra voice interactions is turning off, but those children cannot be silenced.
Wow! Robin Hood!
In the end, sound design is fine, music does what it needs to, but only a couple of tracks stick with me, Sherwood's theme in particular. And the voice lines do sound really fun and memorable. They liven up the game immensely, just a shame they can be heard too much. And their combat is so noisy, any individuality of the lines is lost. Taking a look at the gameplay of a single-player campaign with a semi-non-linear progression of missions, centered around Robin and his terror tactics to unseat Prince John. First of all, there are 3 difficulties, easy, medium and hard, that do the very classic thing of raising enemies' health and damage. Medium is a nice middle ground. I found easy made stealthing a little irrelevant as murder was trivial. Hard exacerbates some of the more significant problems with the combat I have. Playing hard does push you to focus on stealth, and if you really want to be punished for failing stealth, then it's a good option, but personally I like going loud to be an option when push comes to shove, so I was very happy to stick with medium. The game is broken up into missions with set primary objectives that you complete with your unique characters and the band of merry men you can bring, up to a limit of 5. Using their abilities and avoiding enemy sightlines where possible. There's a very handy dandy tool here to see what they can see.
Who are you?
Additionally, there are some side objectives where you help the common folk that can reward you with some gold or clovers, more on that later. After which you need to leave, and upon doing so, you also classically receive a score for the mission with no idea what adds to it. From what I can tell, it comes from money gathered, a few major side objectives, and how many guards you kill or knock unconscious. Knocking out is worth about 40% more than killing a guard. However, time doesn't matter at all, so maxing this would be a case of finding and knocking out every single guard on the map every time. You have a campaign score, so don't you forget it. I mean, I didn't do it, but you could if you really want that high score. There are 6 unique characters in the game, all with their own abilities, and 3 more generic merry men that have set abilities that copy some of the unique characters. These come in the strong and dumb, farmer, and mustachioed varieties. Farmer is your only heal for a while, and damage carries over between missions, making him essential. And he is also your only way of reviving knocked out companions without waiting literal real world minutes for them to wake up on their own. And your only way of putting particularly obnoxious guards out of their misery.
Well, no.
Your local thinking rot may be smarter than this man, but he has 2 things that make him very useful. He can move bodies to stop them being spotted, or worse, woken up, and he does blunt damage.
Is your head broken?
In the game, swords do slash damage,
You'll see! Are you...
You fought well.
and clubs and sticks do blunt.
There, 1 less.
Slash kills, and blunt is more likely to give a concussion.
Next.
This is particularly useful as Robin is a hero, so slaying hapless guards does not give him a great reputation with the local peasantry. It can limit your ability to recruit more generic merry men, so having a man that can straight up fight and knock people out is very useful. Robin does actually use a quarterstaff on ambush missions, but for some reason, when he's in a city, he puts aside his trusty stick for a blade. Quarterstaffs must not be in fashion in the cities. Then, despite this man's wonderful mustache, this merry man goes in the bin. He can shoot a bow worse than Robin, block archers with a shield, but the system is very clunky, and he can tie people up. Something that would be very useful if we didn't get a unique character immediately who can do the same thing with better abilities. When knocking someone out, they'll see stars that will over time get slowly smaller, and they'll eventually wake up. Tying them stops this, so you always want someone who can do that, assuming you're knocking people out and not littering the street with corpses instead. And in that vein, I have to mention Little John before I move on. He's the true hero of the Merry Men. He's very good with his stick at knocking people out, including multiple people at once. He can also move bodies, and his right hook is even better than Robin's. Robin can't knock out sergeants or knights above the very first light blue rank, making them quite awkward foes. But Little John with his not so little fists can take out armored knights all the way up to the Blackguard. Just incredibly useful, this man. A-star. As I mentioned ranks, let's have a look at the foes that get in Robin's way. There are lancers, archers, pikemen, men-at-arms, crossbowmen, knights, sergeants, and the extremely lethal horsemen. Each comes in a coloured rank ranging from light blue through orange and red and ending in black. Ranks largely only affect health, but they also seem to improve the AI in combat a little to get more hits through the automatic blocks of your squad members. Now, if someone were to get downed, and if they were a more generic fellow, then they just die. But you can call for reinforcements from Sherwood, although you can't control who you'll get. If a named character dies, then you can revive them with a clover, a unique reward acquired by completing side objectives in the missions. These clovers last the entire campaign, so they do add a lot of tactics, as running out in the late game can put you in quite some tight spots. Between missions, you return to Sherwood, your home in the canopy of the forest. Here you can set unused characters to work, producing the consumables you use on your abilities, or to improving their combat or archery skills. Time only passes here between major missions, so you'll come back to a new collection of herbs, nets, wasp nests, ale, etc. Major mission means there must be minor missions.
Quick, come back here.
Minor missions are ambush missions set in one of the 3 maps set in Sherwood Forest themselves, either collecting gold from a trapped carriage or knocking out a member of HM Revenues and Customs for loot. They do try to keep these missions interesting with some unique traps to activate, but on the whole they are quite repetitive and also a bit unbalanced. They have quite a high enemy density towards the end, and also later almost always have a horseman, making things much harder. I feel like I've missed something here. Ah yes, the combat. Combat, simply put, is not very good. I know, surprising in a stealth game. You fight by clicking on the enemy and hoping he doesn't immediately block it, or you can click and drag your mouse to cause an attack, either a stab, push, or a sweep from either side, depending upon where you drag your mouse. Or you can just mash that shit everywhere and do a special attack. Doing the attack costs energy, bigger ones costing more. Once that blue bar is empty, time to take a quick energy drink break before the guard takes advantage and stabs you. The main problem is that guards, especially high rank, high quality guards, will block you, and they can do this almost instantly, interrupting their own attacks. It really does feel like a luck for when something will connect. Basic troops, conversely, are very bad at blocking and pose little threat. There are some other problems here. For one thing, combat that has multiple people fighting is impossible to control. And if you are foolish enough to try, then there is friendly fire too. So good job having Little John knock out your entire party. There are some great moments of executing a plan and trapping guards or slipping by them once distracted, and the responsiveness of guards to investigate, along with the surprising number of specific voice lines for different situations, are really the highlights. Unfortunately, combat can occasionally bog down missions when it's hard to avoid, and you will do a lot of knocking out, tying up, and hiding bodies. The game doesn't outstay its welcome at only 15 hours runtime, but it's a good thing it isn't any longer. Trying to do more would require some combination of more systems, guards, or abilities, as you'll likely have solved the game and settled into a comfortable groove by the last few missions. The final mission is at least a good test of how solved you think the game really is, with more enemies and traps for Robin than ever before. The story is a fairly lightweight affair, with many callbacks to the original ballads with several recognisable characters. You start alone in Leicester with Robin, not sure why the sheriff's men are everywhere. Following some information gathering and a daring rescue of a man named Stutley and some of his men, Robin has the start of a team of merry men and an idea of what you're up against. The sheriff has disinherited Robin and is bleeding the common folk dry with taxes, and it's up to you to reverse this state of affairs. If you know the common versions of the story, then there's very little here to surprise you, sadly. made Marion exist just to be ever so slightly flirtatious, and of course Prince John is no better than a sheriff trying to usurp his brother for the throne. Over the course of the story, Robin's job is to steal back the ransom money from the prince's taxes for a total of £100,000 and raise a rebellion. The actual ransom of the real King Richard was 150,000 silver marks, which was 3 times the annual income of England at the time. Whilst I think the VAs did a good enough job with what they got, the story itself is dreadfully bland. Nothing like a character arc and a plot that plods along with just enough conviction to justify all the guards you need to dispose of for the mission objective. Which is a bit of a shame, really. I think being a bit adventurous here would have really made the game something special. I mean, most of the characters only have a few lines when you first meet them and never again. And I think the band of Merry Men with a set of more story-centric voice lines could have really sold their camaraderie. Just adding some more conversations to the start and end of missions that was purely fluff really would have given a lot more writing space for giving the characters personalities. An example of one of the few places they have this fluff already are these rather funny notes you can read from Prince John to his sheriff whenever you purloined a prize royal doohickey. The developers did spend some extra effort on the rebellion, and if you'd like to leave some mystery to the game before playing, then skip to here for closing thoughts. They're not missing much, but there is a cool little gameplay change in particular to talk about. So, you find Godwin locked up in the dungeons of his own castle, Leicester. And after freeing him and his men, you'll kill all the guards to recapture Leicester. If you lock someone out, they do count as being out of action to finish the mission, but if any of Godwin's men see these tied up, helpless prisoners, it is death on sight. The Geneva Convention is a long way away from the 12th century. Following this is a campaign to both capture all 5 settlements and kill all of the prince's co-conspirators, while still earning enough money for the king's ransom. The direct assaults are quite an interesting change-up. As you clear sections of the map from the prince's troops, you'll earn blazons. Earning all of them and defeating a lieutenant is normally the victory condition for the assault. As you do earn blazons, Ranulph's and Godwin's men will rush to secure the new territory, and you can cause some pitched battles to occur between the two sides, particularly in the attack on York. There are also attacks from the prince's forces attempting to recapture territory. You block these by acquiring free blazons from Sherwood through one of 3 methods. You can either outright buy them, setting back your ransom earning, send Merry Men out to help scout, they may or may not return safe and sound, or you can do an ambush mission to earn 1 or 2 blazons, if you aren't bloody bored to death with these missions by then. Just try to send Merry Men. If you've not been playing the Butcher of Blaviken with the guards, then you should have plenty. The defending system is a bit jank, but the fact that there's some reacting to you in terms of mission and getting to be a bit more involved in, well, a civil war is at least a bit cool. As rebellion takes his fortress and cities, eventually the prince holes up inside Nottingham with just the sheriff left. The last mission is not an assault, but instead a normal infiltration, to kill the sheriff and capture the prince and save England. At the very end, you have your final showdown with the sheriff and slay him, leaving Prince John alone, with which he finally capitulates. At the very end, we are rewarded by a cutscene similar to the one right at the start of the game. These cutscenes are honestly really good. I'm kinda surprised how fluid the movement and the choreography are in a game over 20 years old. A final combat in which Robin loses to the returned King of England Richard. Then something happens that still absolutely floors me.
What? What's that arrow?
The realization of a hope, Your Majesty.
Robin tries to claim it's the same one he fired in the opening cutscene.
Because the king will come back before this arrow touches the ground.
It's been weeks, if not months, for Robin. Was one of his merry men just always ready in a bush to reshoot that arrow? Did they have to practice for this? Or did Robin's prophetic arrow enter orbit and via the dark arts of physics only land right now? It's just such a zany, over-the-top ending. The question of that arrow will take a corner of my mind forever. Well, I'll have to share.
Wow! Robin Hood!
I have raised a few complaints here. Lack of a real story, voice line repetition, combat being clunky, and a bit of a lack of environment variety. This game remains a childhood favourite, and one that replaying much later I still had a lot of fun with. It's simply very charming, and some of those complaints are things that would make the game better, but I'm not really sure it needs. More beautiful maps would be great, but we already have several and the gameplay loop is very engaging. If you like your strategy games to have a side of story, or were hoping for more combat and stealth though, then it's probably not for you. Robin Hood is just under £6 on GOG and Steam, and to me it's well worth that price. It's fun tactically, lovely to look at and to listen to, most of the time,
Robin Hood!
and has a very special place in my heart when I was just 7 years old playing the demo at a friend's house. With that, thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.